On today's episode, we'll discuss what I learned after wearing a CGM for 10 days after taking a 2-year break, why I decided to wear one now, and what I'm doing differently this time around versus when I first started wearing them in early 2021. I'm Caitlin, and your host of the Glucose Glow Up Show. I'm a born researcher and girl mama who dove into metabolic health research and healed my insulin resistance with a desire to grow our family. Now I'm peeling back the curtain on how I achieved my glucose glow up and sharing my story so we can all achieve optimal health. I believe we all want to be healthy but are confused by all the noise out there. Whether you're looking to start or grow your family, want to improve your fasting glucose and A1C, or learn how I'm biohacking my health for longevity, you're in the right place. Let's get glowing. So let's get into why now. Why am I wearing a CGM now after about a 2-year break? I used the CGM originally as an accountability factor to heal my insulin resistance and some tracking during my pregnancy for peace of mind and just to make sure things were staying on track. I stopped because I no longer felt I needed it, and sometimes I personally can become too obsessed with tracking and knowing what my numbers and levels are, so I just decided it was time to take a break. And also, it can be kind of expensive, so it wasn't something I felt I absolutely needed, so I stopped for a little while. And after having my daughter, tracking was not really something that was top of mind for me. I had an unplanned C-section, and recovery plus caring for a newborn were really my new top priorities versus knowing what my levels were all the time. So now I'm in a new season with a toddler who's becoming more and more independent by the day, and I even get to get up a little extra early on purpose for time for myself, for reading or journaling. And this is very new because she was not a great sleeper until around 18 months plus. So I knew that this was a good time for me to start jumping back into some of those habits that I used to have. I also knew the sleepless nights were not helping my levels, so I could be discouraged when I had a newborn that my levels are wonky. I also was eating kind of whatever I could find, making simple meals, taking whatever people would bring us, and just trying to get some rest in between nursing, nap schedules, and just needing downtime overall. So now I just really have the margin to track and get back into knowing what my levels are. And I know how important it is for my overall health. So I just wanted to check in and see how far off maybe I am, or maybe my levels are in a good spot. So now is just really a great time for me to jump back in. Now I want to talk about what I'm doing differently this time around than when I was wearing a CGM in early 2021. First thing I'm doing differently is I am wearing a different type of CGM. Previously, I was doing the Freestyle Libre. That was what was available when I was doing the Levels Beta program, and now I have access to the Dexcom G7. So this is my first time wearing that. So in a future episode, I'm going to be doing a comparison of the two. I'm also sharing as I go. Most people did not know I was wearing a CGM, and if they did, it was very confusing. They didn't understand. Why are you tracking your metabolic health? What does that mean? What's that thing on your arm? And I was asked, if I have diabetes, things like that. So this time around, I'm sharing and happy to answer questions, and people are asking more specific questions, and I'm able to help them. I'm also trying to input more info about the food I'm eating into the Levels app. They have a really great macro tracking aspect now. This is brand new. There's a lot of new features in the app. So I'm still working on that. It's a little time consuming, but it's something that I want to start focusing on a little bit more. Another thing I'm doing differently is I'm not really quote unquote experimenting with foods. I see people making videos like, here's how a Twix bar affects my blood sugar or a Coca-Cola, and they're not pairing them with any fats or proteins. And I think we all know that those things are going to spike our blood sugar. And for me personally, I don't need to experiment with that to know what's going to happen. I'm really just trying to optimize my health and find the right balance of meals and snacks that work for my body to keep everything stable. So, what you're going to see from me is just my lifestyle and how I'm trying to find the right foods for me Yeah, I make mistakes along the way because I don't always know what works for me. So you are going to see, like, oh, that food spiked her. It might not spike you, but it is maybe something to be cautious of. So those are some of the things you'll see from me versus experimenting. The other thing I'm doing differently is I'm not double checking my numbers as much with the glucometer versus the CGM. So the CGM is not as accurate as a blood test or using a glucometer because the CGM just measures your glucose based on the fluid within your cells. So it's more to see the trends and patterns of how your body's reacting versus the true number. So I don't need to know the numbers as much. So that's why I'm just using the trends to just kind of see how my body is responding to things. Okay, so now let's get into some of the things I learned in the 10 days while wearing the CGM. So I've worn the CGM before, but these were just some like reminders and some new things that I've learned in this short period of time. So all the little snacks and bites, eating the leftovers from my daughter, like they really add up and they were affecting my levels. So just something to keep in mind. I might be speaking to the parents out there with young kids, but they hand you their leftovers or you don't want to waste food, and those things just really added up for me. So I'm going to try and be a little bit more careful about that. Another thing is sleep. I knew this, but sleep is a huge factor, and I know that sleep deprivation does create wonky levels, and you could see a difference throughout that day or even during the week if I'm having a really bad night's sleep. So just something that I needed to remind myself of. Also, I still need to investigate products a little bit closer and understand why I had a spike. So, for instance, there was a couple days we were traveling a little bit, doing day trips, and I had this beef jerky. I believe it was Archer Farms, and there wasn't really much in there other than maybe a high level of soy sauce. So I'm not entirely sure. So I had that, and then occasionally I have some other electrolyte type beverages. I don't do this often, but I had the Body Armor Light, and that with the coconut water in there seemed to also be a culprit. So just something to consider, like even the things that seem healthy can still be causing a spike, and these cause like a pretty big spike, like an increase of 37 milligrams per deciliter if I'm remembering correctly. So I was a little puzzled by that. So it was either that or the other thing. So beverages and even certain healthy snacks can spike your blood sugar. Another thing I learned that in this season with a toddler, if I'm not planning ahead, like it definitely creates a recipe for me to need a quick meal like pizza or something. So it's just a reminder to me that even on a really busy day, if I would take 10 minutes in the morning to just plan my day a little bit better and make sure I either do a grocery pickup order or whatever I need to do to make sure I have healthy food in the house, like that's something that I absolutely need to do. And it's not to say that pizza's not bad, but when you're not planning for it, well, it definitely changes the course of your day. Another thing is going too long without eating. I need to remind myself that I crave carbs when I try to extend meals too long. So I sent out an email and, we went golfing one day and I just didn't eat a whole lot. And it ended up being like, we went out to lunch and had a sandwich and it was basically all carbs, sandwich and then the chips on the side. So I went way too long and then obviously I had a huge spike. So I just need to remember to even have like a small snack in between to avoid like my levels getting too low and then like having that spike be really large. Another thing that I learned is my go-to protein smoothie was really key for my stable levels. I wasn't having one of these as often when I originally started wearing a CGM. I was a little bit cautious about certain protein powders and things like that while I was pregnant, so it wasn't something that I was having regularly. But I do my research on third-party testing and things like that for the products I use. So I feel pretty comfortable with that and excited that some of the things I was having daily are keeping my levels stable. And then another thing, I just like really actually enjoy knowing my numbers, and it's cool to see, I am less tired and I have more energy to put into myself, and it's like actually fun to be tracking this again. So I'm actually enjoying it and hoping I can kind of do this every so often. One more thing I learned is even though I had the same meal, it can have different effects on different days and even different times of day. So I made these sourdough discard pancakes and I had eggs and sausage on the side with some fruit, and I had them on 2 different days. One day when I was really just off all day. I think it was the day we went golfing. I had a 37 milligram per deciliter change in glucose with that meal. And then another day we had the same exact meal and I only had a 25 milligram per deciliter increase in glucose with the same exact meal. And that day I had very stable levels. So it's not to be discouraged if you spiked with one meal one day, because that day might look different than the next. So just something to consider, like don't ban that food. I don't believe in, eliminating food groups and things like that. So just being mindful of like what was going on that day. Were you more stressed? Did you just start the day off wrong with maybe a higher carb breakfast or something? So just something to consider there. And then overall, I like I said, I enjoyed this. I had some large spikes and some higher levels occasionally in the morning, but I knew that all the work that I've been putting in is still helping. And I just know my body so well that in the back of my mind, I'm kind of always thinking about how can I optimize this meal or snack to eat for fuel and stability. And of course, I'm still going to have the occasional treat, but it's really exciting that I still kind of can understand what my body's going to be doing with a certain food. And so I'm just excited to keep wearing the CGM for a little bit here. And I'm so excited to share more. So stay tuned for more updates on what I'm learning with my CGM this time around. So just to close out this episode, I just think it's so cool that we get to know and understand our body so well and how it responds to food, exercise, stress, and just our overall lifestyles, and just understanding that there's so many pieces to put together and figure out what works for each of us. And I find it fun. And being in a different season of life, it was cool to just kind of see how different things are affecting me and different things that I learned. When I first started this journey, I was in my late 20s with little responsibility outside of work and the household. So now I have a toddler that keeps me busy, and rest looks much different these days. So whatever season you're in, it's just always a good idea to check in on your metabolic health. One of my goals is to just do a check-in once a quarter just to keep myself accountable. That might not always be with the CGM, might just be with my glucometer at home, but I think quarterly is just really nice because you can kind of mix up your meals or test things out, and maybe your stress levels or exercise looks different in different seasons even throughout the year. So just something that I'm going to keep doing. So thanks for listening today, and share this with someone that you think might benefit from this.